Hello and welcome to Swadharma IAS Academy. I am your lead lecturer for today's deep dive into the Indian Constitution and polity.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
Today we're going to be tackling a subject that, well, it really forms the very foundation of our democracy. Yet it's often one of those topics that gets overlooked until, the exam pressure really starts to set in.
I know exactly what you mean.
We're going to be dissecting the architecture of the state where it truly touches the soil, local self-government.
And as a senior aspirant who has, frankly, spent far too many nights analyzing previous year's question papers, I can definitely vouch for this. Today's topic, Panchayati Raj and municipalities, is an absolute goldmine for marks.
It is, isn't it?
It's so deceptive. On the surface, it looks simple, but the examiner just loves to twist the specifics. Whether it's in prelims, where you get those really tricky questions on specific articles or maybe committee recommendations.
Yes, the chronology of the committees is a classic.
Or in Maine's GS Paper 2, where you're asked to critically analyze the devolution of powers. You just cannot afford to skip this.
Absolutely right, and that's precisely why our mission today is very, very clear. We are moving beyond just rote memorization.
We have to.
We are going to build complete conceptual clarity. We want you, our listeners, to understand why this system exists, how it evolved through a rather turbulent history, and the constitutional nuances that distinguish a real functioning institution from just a paper tiger.
That's the key difference.
It is. So, before we jump in, just a quick reminder for everyone listening. Watch till the end for complete conceptual clarity, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Swadharma IAS Academy. All right, let's dive in.
Okay, so I want to start with the most fundamental question. It's something I think a lot of beginners and even some veterans grapple with. We already have a strong central government in Delhi. We have powerful state governments. Why complicate the whole administrative structure with a third layer? Is it just bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to understand it, we really have to look at what political scientists call the distance argument.
The distance argument.
Okay.
Let's take a practical analogy, one from our source material, to really help you visualize this. Think about a very large state like Maharashtra.
Right.
You have the capital, Mumbai, a massive, sprawling coastal metropolis. It's dealing with high-rises, humidity, urban flooding.
A world of its own, really.
Exactly. Now, picture a district on the complete opposite side of the state, like Gondia.
Okay, Gondia. That's on the extreme eastern side, bordering Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. Very remote from Mumbai.
Very remote. The physical distance between Mumbai and Gondia is over 950 kilometers. To put that in perspective for you, that's roughly the distance between London and Berlin. It's vast.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that far.
It is. Now, imagine the reality on the ground in these two places. Mumbai might be experiencing a deluge-heavy monsoon rains, flooding, the kind of urban waterlogging we see on the news. The entire state administration in the capital, in Mantralaya, is focused on flood relief.
Right, that's the priority. But 1,000 kilometers away in Gondia, they could be facing the exact opposite problem. A severe drought. The heat is touching 48, maybe 50 degrees Celsius. The crops are withering. The wells are dry.
So the problems are diametrically opposite. One place is drowning, the other is parched.
Precisely. And a legislator, an MLA, sitting in an air-conditioned assembly hall in Mumbai, they may not prioritize or, frankly, even fully understand the specific nuances of that agricultural distress in a remote village in Gondia.
There's a physical gap, of course, but you're also talking about a psychological gap.
A massive psychological gap. Their lived realities are completely different.
And I suppose there's a huge accessibility barrier, too. I mean, a poor farmer from a village in Gondia, he can't just hop on a train to Mumbai to meet the chief minister, or even his local MLA every time a hand pump breaks or a small canal runs dry.
Correct. The cost, the time, the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And let's be honest, the MLA rarely visits that remote village once the elections are over. The bureaucracy, the district collector, or the BDO, they are often disconnected from the ground reality, or they're just completely overburdened with other tasks. The solution, therefore, is to bring the government to the doorstep.
To the village itself.
Yes, because local people understand local problems better. They know the terrain, they know the specific water channels, they know the behavior of local wildlife that might be destroying crops. They know which medicinal plants grow where. They understand the specific social dynamics of their community in a way that an outsider, even a very well-intentioned IAS officer, might miss entirely.
This actually reminds me of a concept, I think it was a prelims question back in 2017. The difference between democratic decentralization and administrative delegation. It sounds like jargon, but the distinction is absolutely vital here, isn't it?
It is the core of this entire subject. So many aspirants confuse the two, and it's a trap.
So what's the key difference?
Okay, think of administrative delegation as just a higher officer assigning a task to a subordinate. It's like a district collector telling a tahsildar, go and collect the revenue from this area.
So the power is still at the top.
Exactly. The power still resides at the top. The person at the bottom is just a tool, an agent for execution. But democratic decentralization, which is the entire philosophy behind Panchayati Raj, is about something much more radical. It's about actually stripping power away from the center, from the top, and giving it to the people themselves to govern themselves.
So it's about participatory democracy.
It is participatory democracy in its truest sense. It's not just about the village executing orders that have come down from Lucknow or Delhi. It's about the village Gram Sabha deciding, you know what, we need a check dam here, not a community hall, and then having the power and the funds to actually execute that decision.
That philosophy sounds perfect,
Yeah.
power to the people. But the journey to actually getting this principle into our Constitution wasn't a straight line at all. I recall reading about the debates in the Constituent Assembly. There was a pretty significant clash between the Gandhian philosophy and Dr. Ambedkar's views on this.
Oh, that is one of the most fascinating and important intellectual battles in our modern history. On one side, you have Mahatma Gandhi, who was, you could say, an idealist when it came to the village.
Right.
He truly believed that India lives in her villages. For him, village republics or Gram Swaraj were the soul of the nation. He envisioned a governance structure that was built from the bottom up, with the village as the primary self-sufficient unit.
A very romantic view in a way.
Well-
But Dr. Ambedkar was, well, he was very skeptical.
Skeptical is putting it mildly. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was a pragmatist, a realist who understood the harsh, stratified social reality of India like few others.
He was worried about caste, wasn't he?
That was his primary concern. He famously argued in the Constituent Assembly, and it's a powerful quote, that in the Indian context, a village is often a sink of localism, a den of ignorance, narrow-mindedness, and communalism.
That's a very strong statement. He feared that if you just hand over power to a village panchayat without any checks and balances, the dominant upper caste landlords would essentially use that power to legitimize their tyranny over the lower castes.
Precisely. He was afraid it would become an instrument of oppression, not liberation. That the traditional power structures would simply be reinforced with a stamp of official approval.
So what happened? How did they resolve this?
The Constituent Assembly had to find a middle ground, a compromise. An amendment was moved by K. Santhanam, and they decided to place the organization of village panchayats in the directive principles of state policy, specifically Article 40.
The DPSPs, which meant it wasn't mandatory, wasn't enforceable in a court of law.
Exactly. Article 40 stated that the state should take steps to organize village panchayats. But being a DPSP, it was non-justiciable. It was a directive, a guiding principle, a wish. And for a long, long time, that's where it stayed, mostly on paper.
But the government did try to engage with the rural population, didn't they? In 1952, they launched the Community Development Program, the CDP. That was the first major post-independence attempt at rural development.
It was. In 1952, the CDP was launched, followed by the National Extension Service in 1953. And, the intention was noble. It was all about developing the villages, improving agriculture, health, education.
But it failed.
It failed. And the reason why it failed is the key that unlocks the whole story of Panchayati Raj.
Yeah, so why did it fail?
It failed because it was bureaucratic. It was a completely top-down command and control model. It was designed by officers sitting in Delhi or in the state capitals.
Who were prescribing these one-size-fits-all solutions.
Exactly. They were just pushing schemes downwards. There was no real interaction with the local people. They were trying to fix problems they didn't fully understand with solutions that didn't fit the local context. There was no people's participation.
So the failure of the CDP is what led to the formation of all these committees we have to study.
Yes. The government realized they were just pouring money into a black hole with very little to show for it. They needed to figure out why. So in 1957, they appointed the first and most critical committee, the Balwant Rai Mehta Committee.
Okay, this is the big one for prelims. I always use the mnemonic BRM for big rural move to remember it's the first one.
That's a good way to remember it. Balwant Rai Mehta's committee went in, studied the failure of the CDP, and came back with a very clear diagnosis. The program failed because there was no public participation. Simple as that. You cannot develop a village without the villagers.
And what was his proposed solution?
His solution was the term we discussed earlier, democratic decentralization. He was the one who coined the phrase Panchayati Raj. He said, let's create a genuine system of local self-government. He proposed a three-tier system.
The one we have today.
The very same. The Gram Panchayat at the village level, the Panchayat Samiti at the block or intermediate level, and the Zila Parishad at the district level. He argued that all development work should be fully handed over to these elected bodies.
So the people themselves would be in charge of their own development.
That was the idea. The National Development Council accepted these recommendations in 1958. And here's a crucial date for your notes. On October 2, 1959, Gandhi's birthday, very symbolic, Rajasthan became the first state in the country to establish Panchayati Raj.
In the Nagar district, right?
In the Nagar district, inaugurated by Prime Minister Nehru himself, and Andhra Pradesh followed soon after in the same year.
But sir, after that initial excitement in the late 50s and early 60s, the whole system it seems to have lost steam. It became stagnant.
It did. The political will just evaporated. State governments, you see, started viewing these local bodies not as partners, but as rivals for power and funds.
So they started undermining them.
Completely. They would bypass them, suspend them arbitrarily, or, most commonly, they just wouldn't hold elections for 10, 15, even 20 years in some states. The institutions became hollow shells. This period of stagnation and decay leads us to the second major committee.
Ashok Mehta Committee.
Yes, appointed by the Janata government in 1977.
And this is where the examiner often tries to trap us in MCQs, because Ashok Mehta did not recommend a three-tier system.
Correct. This is a critical distinction. The Ashok Mehta Committee looked at the decay and suggested a revival, but with a different structure. They recommended a two-tier system.
Why two tiers?
They wanted to remove the village level as an executive body. They felt that a single village was often too small to be an economically viable unit for planning and development. Instead, they proposed a Mandal Panchayat.
A Mandal Panchayat.
Yeah.
That's a grouping of villages.
Yes, a grouping of several villages with a combined population of around 15,000 to 20,000. And then above that, you'd have the Zila Parishad at the district level. So Mandalan Zila Parishad, a two-tier structure.
He also made a very progressive, or maybe controversial, recommendation about political parties, right?
He did. He suggested that political parties should participate openly and officially in panchayat elections. Until then, the common wisdom was that local elections should be partyless to avoid dividing the village community.
A very idealistic notion.
Ashok Mehta basically said, let's be realistic. Politics is everywhere anyway, so let's make it transparent. He also suggested giving judicial powers to panchayats by creating Naya Panchayats. Now, while his recommendations weren't fully implemented at the central level because the Janata government fell,
Right.
they heavily influenced reforms in states like Karnataka, West Bengal, and Andhra Pradesh, which experimented with this mandal system.
Okay, so after Ashok Mehta, we had the G.V.K. Rao Committee in 1985. I remember they famously called the bureaucracy grass without roots, focusing on the administrative decay.
Yes, they highlighted how the development process had been completely bureaucratized, cutting out the local elected bodies. But the real game changer, the one committee that you absolutely must know, the one that paved the way for the 73rd Amendment, was the L.M. Singhvi Committee in 1986.
This was the major turning point.
Absolutely. The L.M. Singhvi Committee, appointed by Rajiv Gandhi's government, looked at this whole mess, the perpetually delayed elections, the lack of funds, the arbitrary suspensions, and came to a profound conclusion. They said, we cannot rely on the goodwill of state governments anymore.
The trust was broken.
The trust was broken. They realized that as long as panchayats were just creatures of state law, state governments would continue to dominate and suppress them. So their number one recommendation was to give constitutional status to Panchayati Raj institutions.
That was the key, to put them in the Constitution itself. Without that constitutional protection, states could just keep dissolving panchayats or delaying elections forever.
Exactly. Give them a constitutional identity, a fixed 5-year term, and an independent body to conduct their elections. Singhvi also strongly advocated for the Gram Sabha, calling it the embodiment of direct democracy. This laid the entire groundwork.
And then the Thangan and Gadgil committees just reinforced that idea.
They did. They both reiterated the need for constitutional recognition. And finally, after a couple of failed legislative attempts by the Rajiv Gandhi and VP Singh governments, the legislation was finally passed under Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao's government. Parliament passed the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts in 1992.
And for all the students listening, You must remember this date. The 73rd Amendment came into force on April 24th, 1993.
Which is why we celebrate April 24th every year as National Panchayati Raj Day.
Right.
So now that we've established the why and the how, the history, let's look at the machine itself. Let's look at the nuts and bolts of the 73rd Amendment. It was a transformative piece of legislation. It added a whole new chapter, Part 9, to the Constitution, titled the Panchayats.
And it also added the 11th schedule.
Yes, with 29 functional items. We need to break this down, really go through the key articles, because this is where the questions come from.
Okay, let's start with the basic structure. That's Article 243B, right? It makes the three-tier structure mandatory.
It does. It says there shall be a panchayat at the village level, an intermediate or block level, and a district level in every state. It's a constitutional mandate. But there is an important exemption that often shows up in mock tests and exams.
Ah, the 20 lakh rule.
Exactly. The Constitution provides a bit of flexibility. It says that states with a population of less than 20 lakhs do not need to constitute the intermediate or block level.
So smaller states can have a two-tier system.
Yes, they can operate with just a two-tier system, the Gram Panchayat at the village level and the Zila Parishad at the district level. This is just a practical measure to save administrative costs and avoid overlayering in small states like Sikkim or Goa or Mizoram.
Okay, that's the structure. Now let's go to the very foundation of the system, the Gram Sabha, under Article 243A.
I think a lot of people have this vague idea that the Gram Sabha is just a random meeting of all the villagers.
That's a layman's definition, and it's constitutionally incorrect. The Gram Sabha is a very specific, legally defined body. It consists of persons registered in the electoral rolls relating to a village or a group of villages within the area of the panchayat.
So the key is you must be a registered voter of that area.
You must be a voter. An 18-year-old who is eligible but hasn't registered is not a member. A visitor is not a member. It is the body of all registered voters. In essence, you can think of it as the legislature of the village.
The legislature of the village. That's a great way to put it.
It is. Its role is to exercise whatever powers and perform whatever functions the state legislature determines by law. And here's a crucial distinction. The panchayat, the body of elected representatives, is elected for 5 years and can be dissolved. But the Gram Sabha is a permanent body. It never gets dissolved. That's a fantastic distinction. Okay, so if the Gram Sabha is the legislature, let's talk about the executive part. The elections for the panchayat itself, covered under Article 243C and 243K. We often see a lot of confusion about what's a direct election versus an indirect one.
Let's simplify this so you never forget it. Break it down into two parts. The members and the chairpersons.
Okay.
First, the members. The members of the panchayat at all three levels, the panchayat at the village level, the member of the Panchayat Samiti, and the member of the Zila Parishad are all directly elected by the people from their respective territorial constituencies or wards. There is no ambiguity there. The public votes directly for these members.
Simple enough. All members are directly elected. The confusion comes in the chairpersons.
Exactly. The sarpanch at the village level, the block pramukh or president at the intermediate level, and the Zila Adyash or chairperson at the district level. How are they chosen?
Right, that's the question.
Let's start from the top. At the intermediate and district levels, the Constitution is very clear. The chairperson must be indirectly elected from amongst the directly elected members.
So the general public does not vote for the Zila Parishad president directly?
No. The elected Zila Parishad members from across the district will get together in a room and elect one of their own to be their boss. It's an internal election.
Okay, so indirect for block and district chairpersons. What about the village level, the sarpanch or the pradhan?
This is the crucial exception. At the village level, the Constitution leaves the mode of election of the chairperson entirely up to the state legislature.
Ah, so it varies from state to state.
It varies. So, in states like Rajasthan or Andhra Pradesh, the sarpanch is directly elected by all the voters of the village, just like an MLA or MP. In other states like Uttar Pradesh, the elected ward members, the panches, will then choose the sarpanch from among themselves. The Constitution gives this flexibility only at the bottommost tier.
That's a very clear and important distinction. Now, let's talk about the social engineering aspect of this amendment, the reservations under Article 243D. This was truly a revolutionary step, especially for women's representation.
It was indeed. The 73rd Amendment wasn't just about decentralization. It was about inclusive decentralization. It mandated reservations to ensure that power didn't just stay with the traditionally powerful groups.
So how does it work?
Okay, first, for scheduled castes, SC, and scheduled tribes, ST. Reservation for them is mandatory for both the seats of members and the offices of chairpersons. The number of seats reserved is in proportion to their population in that particular panchayat area.
So if a panchayat area has 30% ST population, 30% of the seats will be reserved for STs.
Precisely. And that same proportion applies to the posts of chairpersons in the state. Now, the second big one is for women. The Constitution mandates a minimum of 1/3, that's 33% of the total number of seats to be reserved for women.
And this includes seats within the SC/ST quota as well, right?
Yes, that's an important detail. So, of the seats reserved for SCs, at least 1/3 must be reserved for SC women. Of the seats for STs, at least 1/3 for ST women. And of the total seats, at least 1/3 for women overall.
Sir, I have to interrupt you here because this is something that always comes up. I've read that in states like Bihar and Uttarakhand and Madhya Pradesh, the reservation for women is actually 50%. Am I book wrong or?
Oh, your book is absolutely correct, and so is the Constitution. This is a fantastic question because it highlights a key principle. The Constitution sets the floor. It sets the minimum reservation at 1/3. It does not set a ceiling.
So states can go above 1/3 if they want to.
Exactly, and many states have. States like Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, and about half the states in India now have voluntarily amended their own state panchayat acts to increase this reservation for women to 50%.
Okay, that clarifies it. What about reservation for OBCs?
That's another crucial distinction. Reservation for other backward classes, OBCs, is voluntary. The article says the state legislature may make provisions for OBC reservation. It is not constitutionally mandated by the 73rd Amendment itself. Most states have provided it, but it's at their discretion.
Understood. So to summarize, SC, ST, and women's reservations are mandatory. OBC reservation is voluntary. Perfect.
Right.
Now, let's talk about the tenure. Article 243E says the term is 5 years, but it's the remainder rule regarding premature dissolution that is a frequent trap in questions.
This is a high-yield concept, absolutely. So listen carefully. A panchayat is elected for a fixed term of 5 years. Now, let's say it gets dissolved prematurely. Maybe the state government dissolves it on grounds of corruption after it has served only 2 years. The law says that fresh elections must be held within 6 months of the dissolution. Now, here is the catch that trips people up. The newly elected panchayat does not get a fresh 5-year term.
Right, it doesn't start from zero.
It doesn't. It serves only for the remainder of the original term. So, in our example, if the original panchayat was dissolved after 2 years, the new body will only serve for the remaining 3 years.
That's a very distinct feature because in the Lok Sabha, or a state assembly, if it dissolves early, the new government gets a fresh 5-year mandate.
Exactly. The logic here, presumably, is to keep the election cycles for all the tiers of panchayats somewhat synchronized within a state. Now, there's one small exception to this rule.
And what's that?
If the remainder of the term is less than 6 months, say the panchayat is dissolved after 4 years and 8 months, then no fresh election needs to be held for that short period. They will just wait for the regular general election cycle to kick in.
Got it. That clarifies the remainder rule perfectly. Now, just a quick point on disqualification under Article 243F. The minimum age is a specific data point that's often asked.
Yes, and it's different from the legislature. For the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, as you know, the minimum age to contest is 25. For the Rajya Sabha, it's 30. But for panchayats and municipalities, the minimum age is only 21 years.
And the idea is to encourage youth participation at the grassroots.
That's the spirit of it. Also, the Constitution says that the other grounds for disqualification can be set by the state legislature. This has led to some interesting and sometimes controversial state-specific laws.
Like the educational qualification rules.
Yes. For example, Haryana and Rajasthan famously introduced educational qualifications, like you must have passed Class 8 or Class 10 to be eligible. This was challenged in the Supreme Court, but was upheld, though some states later rolled it back due to political pressure.
I've also read about other criteria, like having a functional toilet in the house or the two-child norm in some states like Andhra Pradesh or Odisha.
Correct. These are all examples of states using the power given to them under Article 243F to prescribe additional qualifications or disqualifications.
Okay, moving on from the structure to the institutions that support this entire system. The 73rd Amendment didn't just create panchayats in a vacuum, it also created constitutional bodies to ensure they can function with some degree of autonomy. Let's talk about the State Election Commission and the State Finance Commission.
These are the two pillars that are supposed to hold up the system. Let's start with the State Election Commission, SEC, under Article 243K. Its role is the superintendent's direction and control of the entire electoral process for local bodies.
So it prepares the electoral rolls and conducts the elections for both panchayats and municipalities.
Yes. It's the ECI equivalent for local body elections. Now, the state election commissioner is appointed by the governor, but, and this is absolutely vital for their independence, they can only be removed from office on the same grounds and in the same manner as a judge of a high court.
Which means an impeachment-like process in the state legislature.
Yes. They can't just be removed at the whims and fancies of the state government just because the chief minister is unhappy with the proposed election dates or the reservation roster. This provision is meant to give them security of tenure and independence.
And the second pillar, this State Finance Commission, SFC, under Article 243I, what's its role?
The SFC is supposed to be constituted by the governor every 5 years. Its primary job is to review the financial position of the panchayats and make recommendations on how the state's tax revenue should be shared between the state government and the panchayats.
So it's like the Central Finance Commission, but for the state and local bodies.
Precisely. It also recommends what taxes the panchayats can levy themselves and what grants and aid should be given to them from the consolidated fund of the state. However, I must add, this has been a particularly weak point in the system.
How so?
States often delay constituting SFCs for years on end. And even when they are constituted and they submit a report, their recommendations are often ignored by the state government because they are not binding. This financial dependency is the biggest challenge.
I think I read somewhere that the 15th Finance Commission at the center took a hard stand on this.
They did. It was a very significant move. The 15th Finance Commission essentially stated that they would withhold performance-based grants to states if those states did not constitute their SFCs on time and make their reports public. It's an example of the center trying to use its financial leverage to force states to empower local bodies financially.
That leads us directly to the core issue of powers and responsibilities. Article 243G in the 11th schedule lists 29 functional items: agriculture, minor irrigation, health, education, etc. But let's be real, in practice, are these powers actually transferred?
This is the most critical question from a mains perspective. The 11th schedule lists 29 subjects, but the wording in Article 243G is very careful. It says the state legislature may endow the panchayats with such powers and authority. The key word is may.
So it's voluntary, not mandatory.
It is entirely at the discretion of the state governments, and this is where we use the analytical framework of the 3Fs to see what's really happening on the ground. The 3Fs are functions, funds, and functionaries.
Right.
Many states have transferred the functions on paper. They'll issue a notification saying, okay, panchayats, you are now responsible for primary schools and local health centers. So the F for functions is ticked.
But that's just on paper.
Exactly. Because they haven't transferred the funds to actually maintain the school building or pay for medicines, nor have they transferred the functionaries. The teachers and the doctors still report to the state education or health department, not to the sarpanch. They are controlled by the state bureaucracy. So without all 3 Fs moving together, the devolution remains incomplete. It's like, as I said before, giving someone a car but no fuel and no keys.
A powerless responsibility.
A perfect way to put it. Now let's pivot to a very specific and important area that the Constitution carves out the scheduled areas. We know that Part 9 of the Constitution, the part about panchayats, does not automatically apply everywhere in India.
Okay.
Article 243M lays out the exemptions. First, some states like Nagaland, Meghalaya, and Mizoram are exempted entirely. This is because they have their own long-standing traditional systems of self-governance through tribal councils, and the amendment respects that.
Okay.
Second, certain specific areas are exempted, like the hill areas of Manipur, which have their own district councils, and the Darjeeling district of West Bengal, which for a long time had the Gorkha Hill Council. Third, and most importantly for the exam, the 5th schedule areas. These are areas with significant tribal populations across 10 states, were initially exempted from Part 9. However, the Constitution authorized Parliament to extend the provisions of Part 9 to these areas, but with certain modifications.
And that's where the PISA Act comes in. The provisions of the Panchayats, extension to the Scheduled Areas Act of 1996. This is a very frequent and tricky topic in prelims. How is a panchayat under PISA different from a normal panchayat?
PISA is a landmark law designed to safeguard the customs, traditions, and rights of tribal communities over their resources. The entire philosophy of PISA is different. It shifts the balance of power decisively towards the Gram Sabha.
So the Gram Sabha is much more powerful under PISA.
Immensely more powerful. In a normal panchayat system, the elected body, the panchayat, often has more day-to-day power. Under PISA, the Gram Sabha, which is the entire community of voters, has supremacy. They are not just a recommending body, they are a decision-making body.
Can you give some examples of these powers?
Of course. Consider land. The Gram Sabha under PISA must be consulted before any land acquisition takes place, and it has the power to prevent the alienation of tribal land and restore any unlawfully alienated land of a scheduled tribe.
So it protects their land rights. What about resources like forests?
They have been given ownership of minor forest produce, MFP, things like tendu leaves, bamboo, honey. This is a huge source of livelihood. They also have the power to enforce prohibition or regulate the sale and consumption of intoxicants. And crucially, their recommendation is mandatory before the state grants any prospecting license or mining lease for minor minerals in the area.
Basically, the principle of Jal, Jangal, Zameen, water, forest, land, is put under the control of the community.
That's the spirit of the act. It's about recognizing the community's rights.
And what about the political structure? Are the reservations different in PISA areas?
Yes, the reservations are much stricter to ensure tribal leadership. In Schedule V areas covered by PISA, the law states that every chairperson of the Panchayat at all three levels, village, block, and district, must be a member of the scheduled tribes.
All chairpersons must be ST, and the members.
A minimum of 50% of the total seats must be reserved for members of the scheduled tribes. This is to ensure that the political leadership in tribal areas remains firmly in tribal hands.
That covers the rural side quite extensively. I think we should now switch gears to the other side of the coin, the concrete jungle. The 74th Constitutional Amendment Act for urban areas.
Yes, the 74th Amendment is the twin sister of the 73rd. It was passed at the same time, and it parallels the rural structure, but for urban areas. It added Part IXA to the Constitution, titled the Municipalities, and the 12th Schedule.
And the 12th schedule has 18 functional items, fewer than the 29 for panchayats.
Correct. The articles for municipalities run from 243p to 243zg.
So the first basic question, how do we define an urban area? I know there's a census definition, but the governor also has a role.
Yes. For the purpose of the 74th Amendment, a municipality is constituted in an area that is specified by the governor through a public notification. But conceptually, we often refer to the Census of India definition, which lays down 3 criteria to classify a place as urban.
Okay, what are those?
First, it must have a minimum population of 5,000. Second, it must have a population density of at least 400 persons per square kilometer. And third, at least 75% of the male main working population must be engaged in non-agricultural pursuits.
75% male workforce in non-agriculture. That's a very specific criterion.
It is. It's to ensure that the economy of the area is primarily non-agrarian.
Now, in the rural system, we have a very clear 3-tier hierarchy: village, block, district. In the urban system, the amendment talks about 3 types of municipalities based on size. Why the different approach?
That's a great question. It's because the logic of geography is different. In rural areas, the structure is nested and hierarchical. A village sits inside a block, and a block sits inside a district. But in urban areas, the bodies are distinct based on the size and character of the city. You don't have a small city functioning inside a big city.
Right, they're separate entities.
Exactly. So Article 243Q provides for 3 types of urban local bodies. Number 1, a Nagar Panchayat. This is for a transitional area, an area that is in the process of shifting from rural to urban. Think of a large market town or a rapidly growing village on the outskirts of a city.
Okay, transitional area. What's the second type?
The second is a municipal council, sometimes called a municipal board. This is for a smaller urban area. Most of our district headquarters and medium-sized towns would fall in this category.
And the third one is for the big cities.
Yes, the third is a municipal corporation. This is for a larger urban area, our big metropolitan cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai. The governor decides which category a particular urban area falls into based on factors like population, revenue generated, and economic importance.
Understood. Now, the structure within these municipalities involves wards, similar to the rural system. Can you explain the concept of ward committees? It's mentioned in the amendment.
Yes. So every municipal area is divided into territorial constituencies known as wards, and a councillor is directly elected from each ward. Now, for larger cities, the amendment recognized that a single municipal corporation can be too large and distant.
Right. The same distance argument we started with, but within a city.
Precisely. So Article 243S mandates the constitution of ward committees in all municipalities that have a population of 3 lakhs or more. A ward committee would typically consist of the councillor from that ward and can include other local residents, and it focuses on hyper-local issues.
So it's about bringing governance even closer to the people, right down to the neighborhood level.
Yeah.
Discussing things like local garbage collection or streetlight repairs before they go to the main council meeting.
That's the idea. Now, one of the major criticisms of our urban and rural development has always been the lack of integrated planning. We see a new highway being built, and 2 months later, the water department comes and digs it all up. The 74th Amendment tried to address this institutional gap with DPCs and MPCs.
Ah, yes. The District Planning Committee and the Metropolitan Planning Committee, these are constitutional bodies that often get ignored.
They do, but they are incredibly important. First, let's look at the District Planning Committee, DPC, under Article 243 ZD. Its job is to consolidate the plans prepared by both the panchayats in the rural areas and the municipalities in the urban areas of that district.
So it creates a single integrated draft development plan for the entire district.
Exactly. It's meant to ensure that rural and urban planning talk to each other. And note the composition, this is important. 4/5 of the members of the DPC must be elected from amongst the elected members of the district panchayat and the municipality, so it's a representative body.
And the second one, the MPC, is for the biggest cities.
Yes, for larger metropolitan areas, defined as having a population of over 10 lakhs, the Constitution mandates a Metropolitan Planning Committee, MPC, under Article 243 ZE. Here, at least 2/3 of the members must be elected from the elected members of the municipalities and the chairpersons of the panchayats in that metropolitan area. Its function is the same: prepare an integrated development plan for the entire metro region.
Sir, we've covered the structure and the constitutional provisions quite thoroughly. But as we start to wrap up, we really need to look at the reality on the ground. For Maines, we need a critical analysis. We established these institutions almost 30 years ago. Have they truly delivered?
It's a very mixed bag, a tale of two halves, you could say. On one hand, we've democratized our grassroots to an extent unimaginable anywhere else in the world. We have millions of elected representatives, and thanks to reservation, we have over 1 million elected women in leadership positions. That in itself is a massive achievement in political empowerment.
That's the political success story. But what about the functional side?
Functionally, there are severe, persistent bottlenecks. Let's look at them one by one. Number one, and the biggest hurdle, is the lack of funds.
The first F.
The first and most important F. Local bodies are overwhelmingly dependent on state and central government grants for over 90% of their total expenditure. They are very reluctant to levy and collect taxes like property tax properly because it makes them unpopular with their voters. So you have fiscal federalism on paper, but fiscal dependency in reality.
And the second F, the functionaries issue. You mentioned that earlier.
A huge problem. First, there are severe staff shortages. But more importantly, it's about administrative control. The executive officer of a panchayat or the municipal commissioner is usually a state cadre officer or an IAS officer.
So their loyalty lies with the state government that controls their transfers and promotions, not with the elected mayor or sarpanch.
Exactly. This creates a parallel power center. The elected representative, the mayor, often feels powerless against the bureaucracy. The commissioner can simply say, "This is not as per the rules," and stall a decision made by the elected council.
We also often hear about the social issue of the sarpanch party or pradhan party culture.
Yes, and this directly undermines the spirit of women's reservation. In many parts of the country, especially in the initial years, the husband of the elected woman's sarpanch wields the actual power. He attends the meetings, he takes the decisions, while the woman is reduced to a mere rubber stamp, a signatory.
Is that changing at all?
I must add, studies do show that this is gradually changing. As women serve for multiple terms, as they gain more experience, confidence, and political networks, they are increasingly asserting their own agency. But it remains a significant challenge.
One final point that was mentioned in our source material was regarding auditing and corruption.
A crucial point. The accounts of the union and state governments are audited by the Comptroller and Auditor General, PEG. But for local bodies, the audit mechanisms are often very weak or, in some states, practically non-existent.
So there's no real accountability for the funds they receive.
And this lack of rigorous social and financial auditing has led to high levels of grassroots corruption. The funds reach the village, but the leakage between the allocation and the actual work done on the ground can be very high.
So given all these challenges, what is the way forward? What are the standard recommendations?
Well, First and foremost, we need to genuinely empower the state finance commissions and make their recommendations at least partially binding on state governments to ensure predictable funding. Second, we need to institutionalize social auditing by the Gram Sabha itself, allowing the community to scrutinize every expenditure.
Public accountability.
Exactly. Also, there's a strong argument for synchronized elections. Currently, local elections happen at random times and are often delayed by state governments for political convenience. As our source suggested, incorporating local body elections into a broader one nation, one election framework, or at the very least synchronizing them with state assembly elections, could ensure their regularity and seriousness.
And fundamentally, it's about a change in mindset from the state governments.
At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. The state government must shed its big brother attitude and its insecurity. It must realize that empowering a panchayat doesn't weaken the state. It actually strengthens the delivery of governance and makes the entire system more robust.
This has been an incredibly detailed and clear session. We've covered the philosophy, the whole historical evolution, the nuts and bolts of the 73rd and 74th Amendments, the special provisions of PISA, and the critical issues they face today.
Indeed. It's a vast topic. And remember, local government is a state subject in the 7th schedule, but it is a national imperative. I hope this deep dive gave all of you the clarity you need for both the factual questions in prelims and the analytical answers you need to write in mains.
I'm sure it did.
Just remember to revise the specific articles we discussed: 243D for reservations, 243K for the SEC, 243I for the SFC, and of course the chronology of the committees. Balwant Rai, then Ashok Mehta, then Singhvi.
Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for staying with us through this deep dive.
And a final reminder, watch till the end for complete conceptual clarity, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Swadharma IAS Academy. Keep learning, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next session.